Again, this is an open youth forum for people listening in. I wanted to kind of do this just because I think we get a lot of questions out there, and I think there's a lot of, not that we're all the experts on here, but it is people that do have boots on the ground for the youth space. And so I'm going to ask questions as we go, but we'll just go around the table here and have everybody introduce themselves for people listening in. Devin, you can go first. I'll direct on this.
Sure. My name is Devin Morgan. I'm the Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of our Driveline Academy. We run a select baseball program that doesn't travel much because that's not a thing that I think helps the kids. We really focus a lot of our time on skill development and then an appropriate balance between training and actual competition. We run a pretty significant scholarship program to make sure that kids from diverse economic backgrounds can all participate. And we just have a really strong belief in the value of a positive, fun, engaging, and skill development driven experience in youth baseball.
Dan, go next.
Dan Keller, working professionally with Team Snap by way of Mojo, and a dugout captain that I started 25 years in the youth space, 20 years running camps, facility owner for 15 years, still training as an aggressive side hobby. And a full-time Little League dad.
Paul, go next. Unmute. We're in the Zoom era. There we go.
Paul Gallo with EL1 Sports and Dodger Training Academy with over 25 facilities around the country, with the Mariners, with the Pirates, working in Iowa, Detroit, all over the country, working to get bigger. We do youth programs around Los Angeles and Washington State with the Dodgers and Mariners. Also, like Dan said, I'm a full-time softball dad, and we try to run indoor and outdoor facilities, camps, and clinics for the major league teams, MLB baseball, and play ball with clinics wherever they send us.
Jimmy F.
I'm Jimmy Filangeri. I am the head baseball coach at Our Lady of Lourdes High School, and I also I'm the host of Clearing the Bases podcast, which is a podcast that is dedicated to development of youth baseball players, coaches, and parents.
Jeff. Actually, Sean, go.
There we go. I got it. I couldn't get my mute. Hey, so Jeff Sofa, work with Royals Amateur Development, where I am an amateur development liaison working in the community to help grow leagues and grow coaches in our area. And I also coach our high school and youth age baseball programs here for the Royals.
Sean.
Hello, I'm Sean Plock. I am the sport development manager for baseball for the Kansas City Royals. We work in the community to build the game through leagues and camps and teams. We also go into the elementary schools and work the Fun at Bat program. So just growing the game within the Kansas City area.
Jimmy. Oh.
All right, another Jimmy. Jimmy Onati. I am an associate professor and director of the Division of Athletic Training at The Ohio State University. That's my one hat. My other hat is I've been a youth baseball coach, high school, travel, so on and so forth for many decades now. I actually stepped out, and I'm a college baseball dad of a freshman, so I get to kind of run around the United States and try to see him. And I also run my own mindset training company. It's called Do Mojo. And we really work on not only baseball players, but teenagers across the country and try to help them create the resilience that we know that baseball players have. So thank you.
David.
First off, nice to see everybody. Nice to see your faces. Ryan, thanks for putting this together and inviting us. My name is David Klein. I'm based out of Northern California. I run Legends baseball and softball summer camp program. We're one of the bigger, kind of private baseball and softball youth programs on the West Coast. I also run two collegiate summer teams on the West Coast. I I have Speedball, which is we have a bunch of franchises and leagues. I also offer coach training, and I'm a little league dad and parent, just like many of you guys. And I'm excited to join the conversation today.
Awesome. And just, I think 1, 2, 3, 5 of you have been on the podcast with me individually. So obviously, if anybody wants to dive back in on those, Devin, I think you're the first out of this group that jumped on with me a long time ago. Actually, this is episode 400 for the ABCA podcast. So kind of nice timing with all of this. And like I said, this is going to be open forum. So I'm just going to throw a question out there. Anybody can jump in. So my first one, just initially, as I thought out about this in the youth space, for as far as gameplay, should the progression be T-ball, coach pitch, machine pitch, and then kid pitch?
I mean, I'll go.
Go ahead.
I think the broad structure of that progression makes sense. I think the thing that's the biggest question is like within those constructions of just literally like the batter pitcher matchup, right? Because that's the big differentiator there. Is how does the rest of the structure of the game need to modify itself relative to like the age and capacity of those kids? And I think the thing that like all of us and anybody that's listening to this is probably really familiar with is how brutal first year kid pitch looks. And even coach pitch, right? When you have coaches who and parents who, with the best of intention, are pitching to kids from 46 feet away, standing on a mound. So now you've got like this, not only a distance problem, but also like a real descent angle problem of that incoming pitch that's going to the kid, right? I think for me, the thing that stands out is just I think oftentimes being really binary about the construction of the game instead of teaching the skills that make up the game in a much more accessible and digestible format. And to break that down into much more common English, let's make hitting a target easier and let's make hitting the ball easier, because all the action that we're trying to teach in the game is all predicated on those two things. So I'm really big on like scaling down in distance and task complexity, making it easier to hit, and then getting into that space over time, because like they do need to learn these skills, but you don't want to make the game just be repressive and boring in the interim while they're learning. I think that's a problem. You know, there was that clip that was floating around social media a couple weeks ago. It was like 45 seconds of a kid pitch game, and it was just brutal because, you know, the kid on the mound is every fiber of their being is put into trying to throw and hit a target. They're not very good at it, and you've got 8 other kids in the field that are just standing, and like if it's tough to watch, then it's really tough to those kids to participate and actually be engaged.
Who else wants to chime in on that progression?
Well, I'll just
go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I'll just chime in real quick. I think that might have been my post, Devin. It was basically like 6-7-year-olds playing kid pitch in Southern California. It was actually a real live game, and the kid, he threw 4 pitches, I believe, nowhere near home plate, like literally way off to the right, way off to the left. Beautiful field out there. Kids are digging in the dirt. Parents are standing around. Fans are out there. There's no way that was fun for the players, for the parents. And if you're saying that is good for the pitcher, we need to just throw them on the mound and develop. That is not development. That kid is not getting better, nor is that fun for a kid to stand out there on an island and throw balls to the backstop. I think the progression you mentioned works, but like Devin said, we're just starting about 2 years too early at virtually every level. Not for
and
every
that's
single
going to be my next question, when that should start. But let's stay on this question first as far as the progression of T-ball, coach pitch, machine pitch, kid pitch, and then we'll get to what age we feel like that should start, the kid pitch.
Totally. Like I said, it's just too early. We're starting with machine pitch, coach pitch, kid pitch about 2 years too early. Everyone wants to push their kids up and to push them, but in a game like baseball, it can often backfire.
I think there's a piece we could add to that as well. Setting aside for a moment whether you're at T-ball or coach pitch or kid pitch, I think there's 2 things that are important. The development model should be way more skill acquisition and practices than games. I feel like we have this societal urge to jump into games and prove ourselves. And to the point you just mentioned, David, I'll put him on the hill, let him throw. He's got to work through it. You know, not at 6. right? We've got to have confidence and develop the skill. And then the other part is the journey of the game through enjoyment. To your point, it's not fun when, we're throwing, can't even get a ball to home plate. Nobody's enjoying that. So whatever it is, there has to be some development angle by the coaches, by the parents, and everybody being on the same page that we're going to adjust more for the enjoyment factor, adjust more for skill factor, practice more, play ad hoc, unstructured type skill acquisition games, and then we take it to a competition field.
Yeah, to go along with that, I think we need to make sure that we have balls in play over a period of time. Whatever that progression is from T-ball to coach's pitch, putting balls in play is the most important thing. And I think we can get into a position where we can count outs more than we can count runs. So a team scores when they get an out. And because we'll just have kids run the bases, and we want to encourage kids running the bases, but maybe counting the outs and encouraging balls in play as many times as we can within a set time frame would increase the activity level and the development of each kid. If a kid can throw strikes, put them on the mound, let them go. If they're struggling, then I would suggest another format or another way of doing it. Just as long as we get the contact and balls in play and rewarding of throwing to the right bases and rewarding of the outs would be my suggestion.
Jimmy, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everybody on these things. I think we don't have to think about it as an exclusive model, right? So if you think about motor learning across the age span, you have different people in different stages, and we try to put things in a finite piece. You're going from T-ball, now you move up to coach pitch, now you move up to machine pitch, and then kid pitch, right? Where we should really think about them all as different skills and different tools to try to attract the different parts of what we're trying to develop. So I don't really like the separation of those pieces. I think we can use different components of it for the different groups that we have out there, and not make it look like a negative when we go quote unquote back down.
Yeah, and again, Jimmy, that's where the parenting piece comes in. How do you have that discussion with a parent that your kid might be 9, but their skill acquisition is as a 7-year-old, so now they're going to have to play with 7-year-olds?
Right. I mean, that's an education model, right? So the other flip side of it is also, and I don't want to go back into a rant about old school and new school type of things, but baseball is a game of failure, and we have to teach that at some point in time. I'm not saying that 2 hours of no swinging of the bat is the best way to teach that, but I also don't think that we should avoid that completely. So at some point in time, they need to have that, and I think that's what Devin's kind of getting at is, what's that progression model? But don't forget that you have to fail to learn. There has to be mistakes happening to learn, and so we can't take that away from kids because that's part of the learning process.
I don't know. We let them throw the ball out there this week. Now, me pitching, kids didn't swing and miss very much, but if they got 3 swings and 3 misses, we let them pick the ball up and throw it out there and run. I mean, that's how we handled that piece in the camp setting this week. Now, let me ask, when should kid pitch start? When should it start? I mean, we had the old Little League model where 9s played with 12-year-olds, and usually the 11 and 12-year-olds pitched. Unless you had it, and that gets into Jimmy's skill acquisition piece, we had some advanced 9-year-olds that could get the ball over the plate, but usually the 11 and 12-year-olds were the ones that were doing the majority of the pitching. So when should kid pitch start?
I'll tell you. Go ahead, Jimmy.
What I was going to say is, and again, it goes back to, again, maybe it is a little bit of the old school, new school thing, but I'm going back to when I played Little League. Okay, so first of all, it didn't start until 8, and even at 8, it was completely developmental for your 8-year-old season. Then it went on to 9 and 10, and older groups. So, I mean, yeah, I believe that we're trying to play games and trying to be too advanced at a very early age when the kids really are not developed physically to do it. So it's something that I think should be looked at as the age where all of this stuff starts. And I think that should start at like 9, 8, 9.
Ryan, for me, there's a second part of that question that has to be added to it to really address it. And I think it's the idea that at kid pitch, at least in our area, that first and second year kid pitch with 9 and 10-year-olds also includes space stealing. We're asking the kids to do too much in terms of the skill acquisition. We're asking them to throw a ball, in a 17-inch space, but at the same time, there's no catcher that's going to throw anybody out. There's no pitcher that's going to hold runners. If we were to truly look at this and say, okay, we can let them pitch, but it's truly about ball and play, as Sean mentioned, and not about ball and play plus runners, etc., we can at least let them get there.
And that's leading into my other couple questions as far as closed bases. When should that open up? When should leads and steals happen? We'll get into that too. David Klein, you got anything on that portion of it as far as when kids should actually get on a mound and throw? Devin, you can chime in after that.
Yeah, I mean, I typically say 10, but I'll take an elite 9. I just think that like kids are not developing per se on the mound. Like, yeah, they need to fail, but like you can't teach a 7-year-old calculus and say, oh, you're failing at calculus, like you're going to learn it. Like they physically cannot do it. That's like, you're not going to take a 7 or 8-year-old who physically cannot throw a strike at 45 feet and just expect him to fail over and over again in a game setting, and he's going to get better. So for me, I like to just delay it as much as possible. I like to say 10. A lot of people have a problem with that. But I'll take an elite 9. But I like the old way that we used to do it back in the day. I think it worked.
I say 11, but
yeah,
let the 10-year-olds play position and hit. Let the 9-year-olds play position and hit, and hopefully you have enough 11s and 12s to not blow up arms.
Yeah.
And Devin, you do mocap with young kids. I mean, what is that showing out of from an arm action standpoint, from a safety standpoint? What is it showing with the motion capture as far as when a kid should actually get off the slope?
I think what the data that we've got from kids that have done a biomechanics assessment in our facility show is the same thing that I think we all tacitly understand, and it's the reason why this is such a difficult question, which is variance. There is such a tremendous amount of biological variance that it's really hard to kind of go, is 9 the right age? Is 10 the right age? Is 11 the right age? And I think depending on the kid, all of those answers could be true, but systemically that puts a little league administrator or a pony ball administrator in a really tough place because they're trying to go, I need to create an age. And everything under that fits in this category and everything over that fits into this category, regardless of whether that's actually appropriate for the child. So the only thing that I would advocate is that, like, if the thing we're dealing with is a ton of biological variance that's really hard to create fast and firm rules around, then let's flip the question on its end and like test for it, right? I think it's reasonable to say that you could come up with a very simple and easy to execute test to quantify, are you able to throw hard enough and reasonably competitively enough to qualify for a kid pitch division? I mean, we're literally talking about probably, 3 sets of 8 at different distances that would establish, on one day in particular, does this kid look like this is like a good fit for them? And if the answer to that is yes, then yeah, let's put you in a kid pitch division. If the answer to that is no, and you're 10, then let's put you in a division of kids that are like you and need that same type of stimulus and development to actually like check that box eventually. I think so long as we kind of approach this from a very binary, one age yes, the other age no, we're going to have these kids in the edges that it's going to be really tough to find an appropriate place for them to play.
And why can't we do hybrid rules where, okay, when you're out of arms, let the coaches pitch?
100%. And that's the thing. I think, the little league that I came up in, we lean into that type of accommodation, right? You could have advanced 9s playing in your AAA division if that was appropriate for them. We could have 10s playing in kid pitch if they joined late and that was appropriate for them. I think what we could have done better, though, is again try to administer a test or some sort of assessment that is easy to execute on a dirt field that gives you a little bit of peek under the hood about, is this division of competition relative to the rules, relative to the system and configuration, is actually appropriate for these kids or not.
In our speedball leagues, at the end of catch play, we'll have the coaches go around and we'll do some bullpen work. And if the kids are throwing about 50% strikes, like able to repeat their delivery, we'll kind of give them a nod and they can pitch in the games. But that if they can't do that, we're not going to put them in games, because then it doesn't make speedball and it's just super slow. So I love the idea of a test like that. I think that's a great idea.
And when should straight baseball start? I mean, again, in Little League, you had to have your foot on the base, but obviously you could advance on pass balls, overthrows. When should that come into play? When should leads and steals come into play? What ages? I mean, again, I have my theories on that, and I think most of it should be closed for a long time so we have more opportunity to turn double plays, get force outs. Kids aren't trying to take crazy extra bases just to take extra bases because coach wants to score runs. When should straight baseball start? At what age? I mean, it's 13 when it should start.
Well, I would say a little bit
too early now, in my opinion.
I would say you got to go a little bit earlier than that, because at 13 they go to the big field, so they're going to need it then. So maybe at 11, 12, this way you could teach it to them at 11, 12, get through, all of the bumps, and by the time they move to the big field, now they're ready for it.
Well, and David said it when I was working with my son's, young travel teams. That was part of their catch play, was pickoffs. Was pickoffs to first, pickoffs to second. That was part of catch play. Even though they maybe didn't have to do it in games, that was part of their catch play, was pickoffs to first and pickoffs to second, just to work on it.
I think Pony has it pretty right. But I think they're about 2 years too early. The 8-year-olds can't lead off until the pitch is released. Real baseball, that should probably be the 9 and 10s. We're Mustang, and then when they move up to 11 and 12, I think the leadoffs are in a better position, because now you're talking about 70 feet. It becomes a little bit more like baseball. The 9 and 10s, especially in rec pony, is a steal fest, right? They're not throwing kids out in the rec level. They're just taking the bases, not really learning real baseball, even though, the elite players have to throw to an elite player in order to get a pickoff. So I think Pony is almost right, but about 2 years behind. I'd like to see real baseball at 11 and 12. And the leadoffs occur after the release of the pitch on at 9 and 10 and the 8-year-olds.
Jump in and support that, Paul. That's really well said. I think the other thing, that having my own boy and growing up I played pony ball. My boy played pony ball. We switched to Little League 2 years ago, so I got to see both. I think what Little League does really well is that flexible age, so they have a little bit more flexibility in playing up or playing down. I held my kid back this year. That sounds like a negative thing, but heck, that's the right spot for him. And it's giving him a chance to compete and not be as scared of the ball. But the other thing that I don't think either program does real well is what you've all mentioned, is flexibility in the delivery, whether that's going from kid pitch to coat pitch on a specific batter because that batter needs to put the ball in play, or going from machine to tee or machine to soft toss because that batter needs to put the ball in play. So having a bit more flexibility. Pony doesn't have any of that, right? It's from one kid to the next kid. So I've never played in a division where we have that, where you have, a coach walk onto the field after ball 4. But I love the concept because of what we all agree is we need the ball in play. So flexibility in the ages is one, and flexibility on ball in play, and what is the vehicle to make that happen, batter by batter.
Real quick, we do that in our softball league, where the girl gets 4 pitches and the girl gets to see, because not only is it beneficial for the pitchers, it's beneficial for the hitters to see another player throwing the ball, to be unafraid of knowing that a coach is going to throw a strike. And after those 4 pitches, then the coach comes in and throws the pitch. After the 3rd walk, the coach comes in and makes the pitch, and it keeps it going. So on board with what Jimmy O was saying with a hybrid. Maybe the first half of the year, the kid pitch, with the coach pitching, and then the second half of the year, you come in and the kids get to start to pitch and just do a hybrid of that rule.
Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing to consider about all this too is the percentages of practices we have to the percentages of competition. We need to make sure that we are practicing more than we're playing, and skill acquisition, and then we can get into the games, and that can kind of dictate the level that we're at and what we can handle a little bit at the age group and the skill level that we have. But if we play more than we practice, then we're always going to be fighting that uphill battle.
Jimmy O, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things is two parts. One is I think it's tough for parents when you say up and down on divisions, right? Because it's kind of like concepts in class. You don't want to be behind. You don't want your kid that's behind, so on and so forth. So I think we have to think about not the age, but really how we name those things, right? Somebody said calculus, like it's math. It's just you're not at the higher level of math yet. You're at this level, right? So we always classify on those pieces, and I think that's one of the things that we have to be cautious about. Second thing is really understanding everything is learning. The games and competition and the practices, they're the same. Like they're all the same. And so in my opinion, a practice in a game is no different than each other. We should make competitiveness in practices, and we should make learning in games. It's why do we separate? In my opinion, like they're all learning pieces.
I think the tough thing too with that is everybody's strapped for time and fields. Where you might have a 5-inning game. If you could give the coaches opportunity to stop and instruct during games, I think that helps that piece of it too. But everybody's strapped for facilities and time where you can blend it where it is like a high school or college practice where it's a coach pitch inter squad, or it's just an inter squad where you do have stop and action. You're going to go over games. Go ahead, Jimmy, if you got something on that.
Yeah, and David, I love the speedball idea, and you got less players and you got more. I mean, we have these fields that are all over the place, and we use a quarter of the field. Like we could take these fields just like soccer does and hockey does, and you got a big hockey rink and they make 3 rinks for the little ones, right? We got fields that are huge, and we can make 3 fields out of those things, right? I mean, we've done it in practices. I know you do it in camps, Ryan, all the time. I see that. Like we just have to think differently, and we don't, I just keep on, all of it's learning. Like we want to engage them, motivation first, right? And then we go from there on, don't get me wrong. I still want our kids to learn how to compete and how to fail, but we just have to structure it a little different.
Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, why not have 2 teams practicing at the same time? Because you have a team of 12 and 8 show up. So how are you going to do a scrimmage? Well, let's put those teams together. Do we really need an umpire? Do we really need the players and the parents in the stands? Put 2 teams together. Now you practice together. Now you got 16 kids. You spread them up. You play a game during a practice, and you put situations. Why do we have to have nobody on base all the time? Why do we have to have no outs all the time? Put kids on base and design your own practice. Do a better job of designing what we can do with these team practices.
We do that. We do that at the high school level. I mean, my teams, my varsity and my JV work out together. We do everything together. So if you could take that model and, drop it down to the younger levels, it makes I know for me, it makes so much sense, and it works. It works real well.
Yeah, Jimmy, just like you talked about, at high school level, we would have, a scenario of we're working with man on first, right? So now we're working all our stuff. Then we're working with man on first and second, right? And we place them there. So for our youth games, we could do the same thing. Like first inning is nobody on, second inning is man on first, third inning is man on first and second, right? And you're starting off that way. But everybody
create those situations.
Yeah, everybody wants to focus on win, win, win. And we know this now, right? But the parents and the players at that time, we still want to win and we're still going to keep score, but that's not the whole purpose of it.
We kept for points, so that's what we did in youth camp this week when we got to the coach pitch portion. Every hitter hit with the man on first base. Then every hitter hit with the runner at first and second base. So they all hit in the same situation. Everybody hit. We didn't keep runs. We kept points for bags. So that's how we kept score. We kept score for if you touched a base, that was a point. And then the great part of that is one team played pretty clean defense. The other team did not play clean defense. So we were able to discuss with them, here's the score total for the team that gave up a bunch of free bases. Here's the score total of the team that didn't, to value the importance of keeping the ball front and playing defense too. And not even making plays, just keeping the ball in front of them to keep runners from moving up bases. David, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So we got so I'm coaching my son's coach pitch team, and we had 2 practices before we were put out into a game. And I was pretty frustrated about it because, like, literally I only met the kids like one time. They're literally putting the glove on the wrong hand, and I'm putting them in a game scenario. And so I reached out to the league. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, these kids are going to be put in a competitive scenario after 2 practices. Then once I got out there, I was like, you know what? This is actually okay, because this game is just a practice. It's just a practice. So back to what Jimmy said, but the other coach didn't see it like that. And so I'm out there and I'm breaking down before every new batter, talking situations, talking ready positions, even when their team is in the field, to the point where one time I'm like, hey guys, what's the situation? And the other coach yells back at me and he goes, we're not there yet. We're not there yet, Dave. And so I went up to him between innings and I was like, coach, this is the time. This is where they learn to play baseball, right here in this game. Practice is about development, skill acquisition, all that stuff. This game is where they learn. So we are messing up if we're focusing on just speeding through it. We got to break things down a little bit and still keep it fast. But to your point, I think it was Jimmy, like, those practices are those games are practices, and we got to treat them like that. And if we had more, like, if it was more centralized, less decentralized, we could have more trainings and things like that coming from little leagues and the big organizations that say, hey, here's the way that we're supposed to do it. Here's how we're supposed to move people up through the game. But it's kind of like the wild, wild west right now.
Devin, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to double down on something that I think Paul and Sean touched on, which is like distribution of time, because it's relative to this whole question. So once again, USA Baseball's long-term athletic development doc, which is available at USAB LTAD, I think is what it is. But if you just Google USA Baseball LTAD, you'll find it. For children 12 and under, the national governing body of our sport is recommending 75% of time spent on practice and 25% of time spent on competition. Now, to some people, and I think some coaches and parent coaches that don't really understand that, they think that, well, that sounds boring, right? And the kids aren't going to want to do that. But the problem is you're not understanding that, like, the practice is competition. And if you're not practicing competitively, even relative to these young ages, you're missing the boat. Like, I did a clinic for a local little league a couple weeks ago, and one of the parents was going to be coaching, I think it was a first-year coach pitch team. And she said, hey, I've got, the league said I have to practice with 2 teams. It's 24 kids on a field. I have no idea how to, like, distribute the real estate. And I was like, okay, cool. This is a very solvable problem. It's just a real estate problem and a time problem. And we just kind of talked through in about 5 minutes. You're going to take that 24 pack. You're going to break them into 2 groups of 12. You've got 6 on one side, 6 on the other that are actually just kind of off left and right center, or off the right field and left field lines. Those kids need to, like, 2 hitting stations. So you can either run, you just need like a coach and a net, right? Or if best case scenario, you got 2, 3 on the right side, 3 on the left, and then the entire middle of the field, you can run 3 other stations with 4 players each. Everybody's going to get a ton of reps. Everybody's going to get a ton of attention, so long as those game and skill stations revolve around the skills that are actually valuable in the game. And those can be defense skills, it can be throwing and hitting skills, it can be communication skills, what have you. There's a way to do this stuff. These are solvable problems if you understand the time and the real estate effect. But again, I think that the problem that David just hit on, which is that, like, this is stuff that I think we all know because we've been doing this for decades or multiple decades. And I have so much esteem for you guys that have been in this thing longer, because I still feel like I'm dumb and learning. Most parents don't understand this stuff. So, like, I did this clinic and I tried to break down this thing in 5 minutes. And the mom that asked the question was like, well, can you just, like, tell me? Like, can you just hand me a thing? And I think that was really telling about the resources that coaches get from some of these larger national organizations who they have the biggest bodies of players still. I mean, we can talk about the effect of club and select baseball, but still the biggest number of bodies is in your pony and rec ball leagues. I think those coaches are just kind of fundamentally underserved with what they're getting, which is why it's good for those coaches to also become ABCA members, because now you have a third party that can actually, from a position of expertise, say, hey, this is how to solve this problem.
And by the way, in camp, we had 7 players on a team. We got through 4 innings doing it that way with instruction in 45 minutes. We played 4 innings in 45 minutes.
Yep, it's totally doable.
Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I think too, when you get back to competition and resources and time management with your field, when we take away a spread time, if we spread a team in an hour and we lose 45 minutes of practice time, that's where I think a hybrid can kind of work in too, where you can reintroduce, you can reintroduce the machine or a tee or something along that line. And I'm all for competition and making sure that we can teach the competition in the game, but we can't cut them short on spreads or mercy rules either. If we have the field and we have the time, we need to make sure that we're out on the field with them for the time that we have allotted in that space and that time.
By the way, you can do competition in training. Okay, when we got to the infield portion in camp this week, amazing. Hey, you got 1 point for a field, 1 point for a throw through the net. You got 2 points. That's competing. You can compete in training and make it fun. 6-year-olds love
100%.
doing that. They love.
It's
they
not
love
even
that part of it. Go ahead, David.
It's not even a can, Ryan. You need
Yes, you
to
need
be
to.
doing competition and training for youth. You absolutely need to.
Yes.
Whenever my coaches say, "Oh my God, this group was so tough. I'm having trouble with this team," I'm like, "Coach George, did you make a competition out of literally everything? Everything from how you hang up
they
your
lost
bags."
points if we kept track of on and off. This is why we played 4 innings in 45 minutes. I timed them on and off the field, and they lost points if they weren't on in 30 seconds. So you know what happened? They knew where their hats were. They knew where their gloves were. They knew where everything was at. They lost points if there was bats on the ground, so their dugout was clean. So it's amazing when you bring attention to that stuff. It cleans all the things up by tracking and keeping points. Go ahead, Jimmy O. I know you're wanting to jump in on that.
No, you guys are awesome. Everything you're saying is great. I think one of the things that we have to get parents to understand is that baseball doesn't have to be 9 versus 9 all the time. Every other sport, we play 1-on-1s, 2-on-2s, 3-on-2s, 4-on-2s, right? We make it tougher. We make it easier. And then the other thing is you don't have to have it. Home plate doesn't have to be the center of the universe. So, and if it is for everybody, then you can bring around your own home plates and you can litter them, or, put them around the baseball field, and you can have many different home plates. And so I think we just have to get people to understand that we can do this just like, we can play 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 basketball in the yard. We can play 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 baseball on a field or in the side yard. We did it all growing up with our wiffle ball games and our, ghost runners and all those types of things. We've lost that. We can bring that back in, right? So,
Go ahead.
I mean,
Hey, Jimmy, you just said exactly what I wanted to say. Go out and watch kids at a park play. Without the structure of the parents trying to tell them how it needs to be done, ghost runners, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, or they're just going to play offense and they're going to hit the targets. They do all sorts of make-believe things, and they're creating competition and skill. We should be, as the coaches, watching them and adjusting how we teach according to what they are trying to learn.
Jimmy F., go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what Jimmy O said about breaking them up in different areas. The school where I coach, we don't have a baseball field on campus. So we use an all-purpose, football, soccer, lacrosse field. And to your point, Jimmy, that spot on, because we'll put a home plate in 3 different corners on the field, break the guys up. And, again, we create competition. They're learning, we're teaching. It's what I wanted to say before is, I don't remember, it might have been Devin that was talking, but what we're all talking about is great. We all understand it because we understand, what it takes to coach, and we have that part. The problem is it's going to take a culture change down in Little League and the lower levels to get people to understand that, in terms of breaking things up and simplifying it, that's the way you teach. And they don't understand. I believe that they try and complicate things. So it's really, how do you change that culture that where they understand that it's small bites that you have to take, and that's how you teach.
Man, we played 4v4 where it was 4 defense, 4 hitting, 4 base running. I mean, that was our.
I think you go back to what
inside. It was a ball inside. We had a basically a 50 by 50 area to play in, and the guy that I was working for, he's like, "How are you going to set this up?" And I was like, "This, and this." He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just trust me. One team's going to run, one team's going to play defense, and one team's going to hit, and then we're going to rotate." And again, you can just have to have some imagination, but a lot of people don't understand that. David, go ahead.
Yes, that's speedball right there. Where'd you go? There you go. There's speedball right there.
I told Scott that. I was like, "Hey, this is speedball." I'm like, it works for this age group.
So my son, he's playing coach pitch. We've had like 2 or 3 games, and we got 12 kids on our team, right? So like, and the game goes pretty slow with coach pitch. Kids are up there swinging and missing. So kids are out there and they're digging in the dirt like all game. Maybe half of the group will get a ball hit to them one time, and we've been getting through the order twice. Okay. So at the end of the game, I'm like, "Hey, Jack's like, oh, did you have fun? Like love watching you play the whole deal." He's like, "Yeah, great. But I can't wait for flag football tomorrow." And I'm like, I'm bummed. Honestly, I'm honestly bummed going out there, because when I'm running speedball, I have full control and it feels like a completely different sport than when I'm playing with coach pitch, because in that same 90 minutes, he's going to get 10 to 15 at bats and 10 balls hit to them into the field, where now he's literally standing out there knock it for 10 minutes while little Johnny's getting a private lesson for 2 minutes every single time he's up at the plate, and it's just so boring. So like, this 12-man team, we could play a game of 3 teams of 4 and it would be significantly more fun, and we have the space to do it. And so there's my little talk track on speedball and splitting it up.
Jimmy O, go ahead.
Yeah, David, that's a question that I have for you. We know in society that the attention spans are going down lower and lower and lower, right? It's tough for me to give an hour or 2 hour lecture in college now because they can't sit still for that. How have you seen the transition of people who go from speedball to, like you're seeing with coach pitch, and are we losing them? Like, is it helping or is it hurting?
Well, they just want more speedball. They're like, we can't wait for Little League to be done so we can get to the speedball thing. It's like so like when we first started doing it, they're like, "David, you got to bring back." We didn't even call it speedball when it started. It was just 4v4 baseball. They're like, "You got to bring that back. We're so bored out here. We're pulling our hair out." And so once they start with speedball, people typically never leave, because it feels like a completely different sport where kids are completely immersed the entire game. They're developing and they're out of breath playing baseball. There's something about playing baseball with 3 teams that kids just are obsessed with. I encourage anybody listening out there, just try it at practice. Just try it. Your kids will ask for it every day.
So then when do you transition them, David, basically is what I'm asking. Like, so do they change over at what age, and is it helping them, or is it making like, well, I don't like regular baseball, so now I don't want to play it in high school or college because this is so slow?
Well, I mean, we basically stopped doing classic speedball at 12. We finished with kid pitch. But here's what I tell you is that the kids that are now going into the little leagues and playing speedball, I wish I could show these screenshots from a text from a parent who blows me up every day. He's like, all these kids are bigger, faster, stronger than my son. They throw the ball across the diamond, but they don't know how to play the game. They don't know how to play baseball. My son, he's smaller, he's not as fast, but he's the most valuable player on the team, because he can play every single position, because he's played that with speedball for 4 seasons. And he knows the nuances of the game. He knows where to be on the field. And that's huge. So we have 4 different levels, and we progress them through it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Jimmy.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to see the long-term part, right? So are the kids who play speedball, do they stay in baseball more after the age of 13, where we know that we start getting the decline, right? Because of high schools and so on. So I'm trying to see, are they staying in it more, or are they just enjoying their 8 to 12-year-old years better? You know what I mean?
Look, I don't have data to support what I'm going to say, but I would imagine that they're going to be better players because they're failing significantly more. So they're learning more. Yeah. Right. And so when they're learning more and you're getting better, typically when you get good at baseball, it's more fun. And when it's more fun, you're going to stay in it. So my hypothesis is that, of course, it's going to grow the game and keep kids in it longer because they're having fun and they're enjoying it and they're developing. I don't have the data to support it. Maybe I should, but I do believe it's helping massively.
And by the way, we rotate defense too. So that 45 minutes where we got 4 innings, they rotate. The defense rotates after every batter. So
every batter, wow.
Every batter. That's been a thing of mine forever in camp setting. Because everybody's going to hit. So after every batter, we rotate first to second to short to third. Third goes to left. Left goes to center. Center goes to right. And right goes to first base. So they rotate after every batter.
I kind of like it. It kind of forces them to be a little extra focused, right? You really can't space out. So I might have to try that, Ryan.
And think about this.
Go ahead.
Right. So I love what you're saying there, Ryan, because now those players rotating through every position, even at an older level, they get empathy for how the game is played with other positions. So at my position, I know why the cutoff is supposed to be there now because I've played that in practice. I understand why the double cut is there. But more importantly, is I'm keeping the game interesting for all of those players. And I think what Jimmy O was saying and talking with David is, well, the speedball game can also be something that we continue as they get older. 2-ball batting practice, right? With live runners, as you mentioned, Ryan. We can create that speed and that excitement in the game as we're picking up skill and having coachable moments. And then, honestly, we game slows during game time, and those players are probably more accustomed to that. So I love the idea of taking aspects of what David does with speedball and making that part of your practice plan.
And the defensive rotation, they're more apt to get more balls that way, too. Again, they're going to be in the outfield for a little bit, but they're going to come into the infield within that inning, and so obviously they're going to touch the ball a little bit more, and it does keep them more active, and they're more concentrated because they're in a new position. You said that their attention span's not great, so if you shift position after every batter, their attention span stays good because they're in a new spot on the field. Paul, go ahead. You've had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, just going on that, if anybody hasn't read The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, he talks about Brazilian soccer in the 50s with futsal, how they moved them to a closer, it's speedball, right? It's speedball for soccer, more touches, more opportunity to be able to do that kind of thing, made those Brazilian soccer players, world champions because they had so many more. I think it was 6 times more touches, which is what speedball is. You're speeding up the game. You get more opportunity to do that and to be able to get better quicker in that game situation. And just touching on quickly what Devin talked about before, the mom came up and said, well, just give me the answers. We talked about this in our youth committee back in November. We're missing out on 50% of the population by not teaching the moms who are the ones dropping off these kids to teach them the game so they can be out there helping us with those kids as they're learning the game and making them more knowledgeable about what our game does and to bring them in baseball and softball to know what they want to learn. The moms that are dropping those kids off want to learn, make them a part of your practice.
And by the way, the women in my family are the most competitive people in our family. My mom's the most competitive person in our family. So for anybody to think that women aren't competitive, watch them interact with sports games, watch them interact with game night. They're going to be the most competitive people in the room. Now, let's talk about calendar here. So if we're going to lay out the calendar year, training, games, and you can break it into the week. Okay, we talked about that, 3 times more training than playing. But I do think that you can mix the training piece in with the competitive piece that day. Even if you're playing, you can still have a training portion of that on that day where you may have 2 games of the week, 2 days of the week you're playing, a training day, but you can have those 2 days of the week that you're playing as also training days. But if you're going to lay out that week and then the calendar year as far as playing portion, training portion, what should it be? Devin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I would advocate for is something that you can be a little bit agnostic with the entire week by week, but I think it informs the more broad perspective, which is if you're running a recreational baseball team in Little League or Pony, I would really strongly encourage you to like think about slicing up the season into a specific phase where you really are trying to develop and everything that entails, and then a specific competition phase. And that's not to say that we're not trying to compete in the development phase, but the point of the development phase is to learn what you don't know. My kids, when they played, they were coaches' kids, right? So when we had our first team practices, not for nothing, but most of the time I could feel reasonably confident that my son or daughter was going to be like the best hitter that we had, or the best pitcher that we had, or the best shortstop, right? But if my perspective on all this is that I need to win because winning defines the experience for me as a grown adult, then I'm going to look at my roster based on the initial assessment of talent, and I'm going to put kids in positions based in order to maximize our ability to win right off the jump. The point of having a development focused phase of your season is to learn more. Like the literal thing we were just talking about is, that kid who gets pigeonholed as your right fielder, right? And we all know what that kid looks like. He's probably the quote unquote worst kid on the team, maybe worst baseball IQ, etc. You hide that kid in right field in order to minimize their ability to do negative damage to your team's competitiveness. But flip that thing, right? If you have a development focused part of your season, then you are actually encouraged to put that kid in shortstop. Not to say that you expect them to make a ton of plays, but like the demand of the position of shortstop is going to inform their perspective regardless of whether they're playing on the field. Same thing on the hitting side, right? You would take that kid who's your least likely to make contact and you're going to bury them in the lineup. Well, if you have a development phase to your season, I think the thing to do is you just run CBO, right? You run continuous. And I mean not only continuous within a game, but continuous over the course of that entire phase. So if we end at like the number 7 hitter, number 8 is going to be our leadoff for the next game. And there's 2 points to that. Number 1 is you're trying to like be equitable about the hitting opportunities that everybody gets. And the best way to do that is not to run your stacked 1 through 5 every time, where each game those kids are going to get 1 or 2 more ABs. It's to get everybody equitable access to the learning environment of hitting in competition. And then the point of all this thing in the development phase is when you go into the competition phase, not only are all of your kids' perspective informed by the variance that they've seen in the positions they've been able to play, but 2, the kids and the parents see it too. So if you get into like your Little League end of season tournament championship and you run the most competitive version of your team, nobody should be, oh, well, why isn't my child playing short? You've seen it. And it just so happens that like Katie's the best shortstop we have and Katie's the best, she's suited to be the number 3 batter. And we've seen that through equitable access to competition opportunities early in the season. I think you can have the kids and the parents buy into that process, a very like even and fair evaluation of everybody, if you give them that opportunity. So then when it is time to go try to win a ball game, and again, I think a lot of this starts with little leagues, making your regular season record literally mean nothing. It shouldn't mean anything for the seeding of your end of season tournament championship. Now, systemically, we have incentive to give equity the opportunity. We have incentive to learn to develop. And then we have a specific time where it's like, hey, we've been competing in training, we competing in games, everybody got equitable access. Now let's compete with the best version of this team and have the parents and the coaches and the players all bought in on what that configuration actually looks like. And it shouldn't lead to this scarcity mindset of like, well, my kid isn't getting this, my kid isn't getting that. It's like, no, my child is helping the team relative to the best way that they can do that. And I think that, again, is just, it starts with a fundamental shift in the initial perspective, like, what's the point of this thing? And if the point is to win, then you're always going to maximize for winning, which is going to leave a certain percentage of the kids on the sidelines. If the way that you measure the success of a coach in a recreational baseball experience is how many of these kids signed up to play next year, different incentive structure, different evaluation, different criteria.
David, go ahead. I know you got to run, so jump in here. Final thoughts for you.
I completely agree with everything Devin said. I'll try to break it down a little bit further and make it a little simpler. And this is the way that I coach Little League coaches to set up their season structure or how to think about it. But I like to break it up into thirds, right? So if you have a 3-month season, your first month, your first third of the season is all just culture building, really, and just basics and individualized instruction, just that to start. At the end of this first phase 2 is all about game preparation, speeding things up, and then getting them into sort of gameplay. But it starts with just basics and starting really slow with skill building. Phase 2, game preparation, speed it up a little bit, more live reps. And the last phase is the fun phase. This is game-to-game adjustments and lots of repetitions, because at the end of the season, you're going to not be able to get the attention of the kids. You want them to end with a positive taste in their mouth. And so for me, start the skill building early and then drive it home with lots of repetitions towards the end of the season. But we really want to take a third of that season to focus just on skill development and practice before we put them in a game scenario. So that's how I like to break the season up into thirds.
All right. Thank you, sir. Jimmy O, jump in here.
You got to run, guys. Take care.
Yeah, I was just going to add to David's thing is all of them are with competition, right? So you can take your culture and skill and you can make competition. You can game prep and make competition. I go a little bit easier than that. We know that multi-sport, we know that kids being involved in a variety of different things is good. And so we should be thinking about the idea of, our 3-month season and whether that's a fall, spring, or summer. But then we should also have some things where it's, they're doing something else. And so we're maybe having a baseball team, but they're going out and playing flag football. They're going to play basketball together. So I when I kind of put together some of my youth travel teams, like we played basketball as a baseball team, meaning we went and entered basketball tournaments as a baseball team. None of those guys went on to play high school basketball, but they learned a lot about how to compete and all these other things, about how they're not the best at everything, and the culture side of things. So when people ask me, I keep it simple. When's baseball season? I said, well, it's all year round. It's just, what are we doing and what's our focus? Is our focus 80% on culture, skill development, and enjoying things? Is it 50% on games and game development and winning? And that changes each month. So I basically say it's baseball year round. It's been baseball for me since I was 4 years old.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I plus one to what everybody said there. I also break the season into thirds. I do it a little differently though. I would say, how many youth coaches listening to this open their season first weekend with a tournament? We practice a little bit and jump right into a tournament. I like the concept of that first, if we're in a 3-month season, that first month is we're practicing a lot more than we're gaming. And if our league play starts in April, we're using that March time frame to practice with all of the concepts we talked about, speed and all of that good stuff. But more importantly, that first half of the season, everybody plays everywhere, everybody pitches. Then we as David pointed out, we move to a more assertive kind of game style coaching during the season. I will say that for any of the coaches listening, this does work, but the key and most critical component of all that is parents buying into that concept. This does not work if you do not have that initial parent meeting where you talk about this. If your parents aren't on the same page and they have different expectations of how you're approaching and what you consider development, you will not have success. So I encourage coaches who are listening that first beginning of the season meeting is so critical in setting out the expectations of how you're going to coach, how you're going to run the season, how you break it into thirds or even halves if you do so. But it will go a long way to having them support the decisions you make in pulling pitchers or moving players around, or to Devin's point, we're not hiding anybody at any position. Everybody has equal opportunity to grow and learn in our program, and this is how we go about it. It will avoid those crazy late night texts and people scrambling.
And Jeff and Sean, for people listening, Jeff and Sean are at opening day for the Royals right now, so that's why we got some background noise going on. Devin, I was going to ask you talked about, because one of my questions was about keeping the cost down. You talked about your scholarship program. How are you raising funds for your scholarship program?
We just make less money.
Love it.
It's really simple. Right now, the construction of Driveline Academy, we don't have a 501c3 that we can do specific fundraising for. Driveline is obviously like a for-profit company. So I will just continue and always give ultimate props to Mike Rathwell and Kyle Bodie, CEO and founder of Driveline, respectively, for allowing us to run teams in this very specific way. I think you guys all understand, the nature of club and select ball nowadays, which is basically you can throw a rock and find a travel team. And there's going to be somebody out there that's going to take a check from a parent, right? And that's just kind of what it is. It's no longer kind of the elite of the elite. It's, I think, a lot of keeping up with the Joneses and parents that feel compelled that, like, well, I love my kid just as much as the parents across the street from me, and I've got $3,000 to spare, so I'm going to put my kid in a select team. And our ability to do this amount of scholarship for kids to be able to play and train for free on our teams is just because Mike and Kyle have given us the grace to allow us to do this thing. And we just, hey, if you need help on the finances, if you need help to book a hotel for the one travel tournament we're going to go to every season, and it's drivable, whatever, it's just money that we've been able to, we make less money because I want more kids to be able to have access to the specific configuration of what we do, which again is like bundling training, real training, like not paying lip service to development, but actually like doing it in a data-driven process, seeing those results, communicating that to the kids and parents, having them be empowered by the actual like verifiable gains that they're making, and then let's go compete and put on a cap and a belt and go win a ball game too.
Devin, you mentioned this a couple of years ago in Chicago because you spoke on the youth stage. You said you would like to go back and redo our first podcast that we did together.
I still do.
I know, but what do you know now that at that point when you're just getting into it, what's the difference for you now as opposed to back then?
I think the differences, the most significant ones, are twofold. One is that I would rather be more critical of evaluating the parents that we bring in than I would the kids. And
I've said this multiple times. We all grew up in a different generation. In youth camp, it is amazing to me how many parents we have stay and watch youth camp.
Yeah,
it's amazing to me.
And the intention there.
I understand they care for their children, but it's like you got to trust other people sometimes.
Yeah,
and you don't have to babysit your kid like that. That for me, it's like. It's almost like with some of the parents, they think their kid's going to be an issue, so they feel like they have to be there to correct their kids. And it's like, get out of here and let somebody else parent and coach your kid for a little bit. It might make your job a little bit easier if you would just leave them for a couple hours and let them do their thing and trust that the person that you're dropping them off to can correct as needed. By the way, as a 49-year-old with a 21-year-old and 18-year-old, I let a lot of stuff slide with those kids. I let a lot of stuff. Well, yeah. Part of it, when my hitting group that we run, they're in the cage with me. We have med balls. We're doing med ball tosses off to the side. So it's not standing. They're not waiting to hit. They're throwing med balls. They're doing jump tosses and scoop tosses into a pad, basically. That keeps them active. I don't really have to worry about them at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think like the core intention there is obviously good. I remember having talks with my uncles about how their parents, my grandparents, would just like, they'd take them to the field and drop them off. And there was a little bit of a want of like mom and dad to be a little bit more present. Not to say in any way, shape, or form that my grandparents were not present. That was just normal behaviors. You just drop the kids off, and that's what it was. So I think the core intention there is good. I think the problem is like it turns into the kid can't just like leave baseball camp or leave baseball practice and leave baseball game and like transition into the rest of their lives. It's you have well-intentioned mom and dads who decide that they need to coach in the car and they want to break down all of that kid's flaws and all of the mistakes that they made. So yeah, I think for us, it comes back to two things. I think having a mind for evaluating the parents a little bit more critically. And the toughest part about that is that sometimes you're going to have really good kids that come with really challenging parents, and as much as you want to help that kid and you want to have them have a path to like get the most they can out of the game, sometimes the parent is going to be such a blocker to getting in the way that like you're kind of just like better off moving the other direction. I think the other lesson that I've learned is just that we can't gate, I think, our approach to only having the kids on our teams be helped. We feel really convicted about the results we're getting. We're building what we call our 90 mile an hour army, which is kids that are 15 or younger that have already hit a ball 90, of which we have about 25 right now. We have the same, it's like the 80 mile an hour army of kids 15 and younger that have already popped an 8. I had a 14-year-old hit 83-1 on the bump the other day. And it's only a result of, again, the way that we're spending our time and the system of development. I think the problem of having that only constricted to our teams is just that, like, we want to improve youth baseball as a whole. So if we gate that for only being able to be on our teams, then like there's a specific construction of that person, regardless of how much scholarship that we offer, that I think is something we can solve. So we're developing some new products that allow us to do assessments and training for kids that aren't on our teams, that are in the youth space that we've never had before. I feel like a dummy for not being able to do that 4 years ago, but we learn these things, so we're working on it.
Jeff, go ahead, and then I want to open up if you guys have other questions that are topics that you want to discuss before I let you guys get out of here. Jeff, go ahead.
You know what? I think I'm going to hold my question for the group, because I think my question is better something addressed by the group.
Okay. Jimmy O, anything off the top of your head we need to discuss?
Yeah, Devin, I thought he was going to go down, and I don't know if he maybe did. I think one of the things that we should really discuss, especially at the youth level, is that all coaches, we have certifications, blah, 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 that we're, working on. But, I feel a responsibility of coaching kids on the other team the same way of coaching kids on my team. And I think we understand that, right? But getting parents to understand that, it's kind of like an umpire, right? They're out there to help all the kids learn. Well, each coach, first base coach, third base coach, sometimes is better suited to be able to help the kid on the other team. Like, maybe, first base, maybe you don't want to play in so much. Maybe, you might want to move back. But we create this environment of this, this toxic environment of I want to beat you for this whatever trophy type of thing. And, and I know people are going to watch this and like laugh at me because I was that guy. So I know how that feels. And so, it took a little while for me to learn that lesson of like, I'm put on this planet not just for my team to win, but for all mankind. Right?
It takes a village, by the way. It takes a village. Yeah. So that should be the motto for all of youth baseball, is that it takes a village to raise kids, boys, girls, and hopefully create better baseball players, because it takes a village to do that.
Ryan, just listen to Jimmy O talk there for a second. I'll bet there's one thing that all of us coaches on this call could say that we do today that maybe we didn't do 15, 20 years ago. And that is, I would say, have a better command of our own emotions. I honestly, I'll tell you, if I could go back 15 years ago, I would probably owe some apologies to some parents and some players, just over the top. I thought I had to get in it and talk in every minute, every pitch of every game. Those reactions when a kid doesn't catch the ball and you put your hands over your face. I have found today, if I am, watch major leaguers, watch Bocce in the World Series last year, just leaning up on the fence and motionless. Right? If that guy could do it at the pinnacle of the sport, why can't we do it as youth coaches? And I have found that goes so far with these kids and helping them stay even-keeled. It sets a great example for the parents. You have a better relationship with the umpires. And if it's the one piece of advice I would want any coach listening to is, above all, be calm. We ask our kids to be calm in the heat of a game. Why can't we?
College World Series, lowest pulses you'll see. There's some outliers. But as long as I've been going to the College World Series, 95% of those head coaches have low pulse during those games. They look like they're asleep half the time.
We are the opposite of a basketball coach.
All right. Anybody got any questions before I let you go for the group?
I would add one more.
I'm glad we did this, by the way. This has been awesome. It's the first for us to do something like this, so this is good. Because I think we all know it. We do the youth summit. We're at the convention. We have these conversations going on, but I think it's good to open up these conversations to everyone to kind of show the talk that we have, what we're trying to get done. But I think it gives people some behind the curtains look that not everybody gets, and I would like to introduce this. You said it, we need to get everyone together. So I think the more of this that we can do, get a look behind the curtains, I think it's better for baseball as a whole.
Well, I just wanted to end on I think the topics were great, and thank you for putting this together. I am blessed in the role that I have with the Royals, obviously sitting out here. And as you guys are talking, I'm watching the Twins go through their catch play. I'm watching the Royals go through their infield work and their outfield line drills and everything that we talk about with youth, and it still happens in the major league, setting. And I am blessed that I can learn from some of the best people around in baseball, whether it be you guys or people within Major League Baseball or our college Division I's, Division II's around our area. But I would encourage all of our coaches to be able to continue to learn and evolve and use your resources wherever you can to be able to make the game better for yourself and the kids, the parents, and whoever you come in contact with, and just continue to grow the game because you're a student of the game, and realize that never stops.
Sean, what were they working on? What are they doing for catch play?
They were doing their pickoffs, bud.
And again, this is good for somebody to hear. Everybody thinks they're big leaguers and they got it figured out. They're just going to roll the balls out there. No, they're getting ready to start a 162 game schedule. They still got things they need to work on coming out of spring training.
Yeah, they're out there working picks, and it's picks to first, picks to second, and they do it right here.
Yep. Jeff, go ahead.
Sean, you went and hid inside the basement area. I came up here to one of the suites, so I'm watching our guys and do pick after pick after pick at first base. Right? Like, there's a reason why the fundamentals are so good, right? Even right before the game, they're going to do it. Hey, I have a question for the group, Ryan. And let me, before I get to that question, I just want to say, I love the idea that you're doing this so that other people can hear the conversations we as coaches with a singular goal of growing the game, that conversation we're having. And the truth is, having these conversations with you guys all the time, always take away at least one thing from myself. And I've been doing this a long time. And I think it's an amazingly awesome thing that other coaches get to hear the inside conversations we're having. And hopefully they could take away one or two things. But I'll leave it with this, is that's the benefit of ABCA, right? That's the benefit of what we're doing here, is these relationships that we've forged over the years of seeing each other at the conference and all. That conversation is what grows you. Hanging out, to Sean's point, he's getting to watch every single day Major League players. Well, we're hanging out with Major League coaches right here on this call. And at ABCA, you got college coaches, high school coaches. That conversation is just information dump that any coach can take away and apply to his program. So that said, I had a question. The number one question I get at all the coaching clinics I do is, Coach, if I have one player that's falling behind, how do I develop that guy without having to stop practice for just one kid and then everybody else trying to continue practice? What do I do if during a drill one guy isn't keeping up, or for whatever reason isn't keeping pace? I'd love to hear y'all's answer to that question, because I struggle with it.
Hey, if one person is having the problem, my bet is with the youth, there's more than one having that problem. So just because you're just talking to one player, you're talking to the whole team. The wise man learns from others' mistakes. When one person has a question, the rest of them have the question. When one person makes that mistake, if you try to give that one person to correct it, you're really working with the whole group. So I don't think it's wasting time. And you didn't say wasting time, but it's not taking away by teaching that one player, because you're talking to the whole group.
And Jeff, I come at it differently now, and having worked as many youth camps as I have since I was about 12 years old, keep the reps going and talk about it later. I'm just, with that age group of kids, the more you can feed them, and yes, you want to correct, but eventually some of that stuff corrects over time with more reps, as opposed to just slowing things down with it. Just have them keep going, and then if you want to pull somebody aside afterwards, take some notes, write it down, and maybe talk about it afterwards. I'm more on the keep the reps moving and keep going, because with the younger age kids, a lot of that stuff's going to clean up over time from a developmental standpoint. And there's only so much you can do with the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old anyway, because from a physical maturity standpoint, just keep feeding them reps. And am I wrong on that, Devin or Jimmy or anybody?
No, you're right, because you can't talk someone into skill acquisition, right? Like, it doesn't work that way, and I think, look, we see examples of, Major League players that are in the cage and Major League coaches that are working with them, and they'll be talking to them about some specific thing or specific intention. And look, I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm the biggest fan of external cues. I'm the biggest fan of like a ball flight target. I'm the biggest fan of attaching a target to throwing, regardless of where you're throwing. But in whatever you're talking about, in a recreational, little league, high school environment, that's not a big leaguer, right? Like, that big leaguer, if they've crossed that particular bridge, they have already checked so many boxes in terms of physical athletic capacity, sports specific skills capacity, that it's tomato, potato, man. When you're talking about children, you're trying to establish skill acquisition. You can't talk them, you can't say the most magic words to help them learn how to move their bodies and perceive a problem. You have to give them repetitions, you have to give them focused intention, and sometimes they just need time. And again, I'll come back to like maybe you need to scale down the task difficulty to suit that child, and maybe the entire group needs that. But to presume that I can just like stop the world and go talk to that kid for 90 seconds or 5 minutes and they're going to just like, okay, thanks, you said the most perfect words, coach. I wish it was that easy, because then if it was, all of us would just be searching for the most perfect words and we would say the same thing to people all the time. But like, that's not how development
and Jeff,
works.
for me on that, if we're talking about drills, changing the external cue for that drill might clean up what you're trying to get them done. So say we're making throws, lower the target. If everything's high, then lower the target for them. Again, that's part of adjusting the external cue for the drill that you're trying to do with hitting. Again, sometimes just changing that external cue for them will clean some of what you think up as a deficiency. Jimmy, you got something on that?
Yeah, Jeff, I think one of the big things, I mean, if you think about the motor learning stages of learning, you have your cognitive stages where you're really thinking about it, your associative stages where you're putting things together, and your autonomous stages where you can do a variety of things, right? Think about riding a bike or swimming, where you can, at the autonomous stage, you can, pull wheelies and talk and do all these other stuff, right? In the cognitive stage, you're beginning, right? So that's the science side. The other side, I would say, if you're a basketball coach, do you stop them every time they miss a shot? Nobody would. Nobody would stop. If every time they missed a dribble, oh no, we go back. We wouldn't. Yet in baseball, we like to do that every time they miss a swing or they miss a throw. And what we have to give them is parameters that, all right, you threw it too high. Let's target lower. You throw it in the dirt, let's target higher. We have to give those opportunities. So I'm fully agreeing with what Ryan and Devin said is, we have to give those things, but these other sports, we don't sit there going, like hockey games are 2-1, 5-3 as a high scoring game, right? They miss all the time, but they don't go out and stop them on the ice and say, hey, here's how you hold your stick. Yet we do that as a batter all the time. It's like, let them fail. That is learning. So I actually take the word failure out all the time, and I say we're always learning. That's it.
Yeah,
with 6-year-olds, I'll tell you what. With 6-year-olds, if we're working on ground balls, a lot works with no glove on. A lot works if we're working on throws. With our 6-year-olds this week, I did not roll a ball to them. They had everything in their gloves. If we were working on throws, the ball was in their glove or it was in their bare hand, and that's where we started. Because again, I didn't want to overcomplicate what we were working on. I wanted to simplify what we were working on. And then, yes, as they progress and get older, then you can do. But you can clean a lot of stuff up by taking the glove away from them on a lot of their stuff.
I'll tell you, Ryan.
The other thing, we're swinging with the wiffle ball bat. Our wiffle ball bat swings were really clean because it was a lot.
I'll tell you, implement. If there's any one thing I've learned from listening to Devin's podcast, is that variability in progression training, how important it is. To your point, Ryan, start with the ball in the glove, ball in the hand, work from there. But I love everything that Jimmy and Paul and everybody's added here, because it truly is the number one question I get at every coaching clinic I do. And I feel it's because a lot of coaches sense the pressure from the parents to develop the players and increase at a large scale their skill acquisition. And right, we know that there are challenges coaches face and the expectations on them, so I know they feel that, and I think it's a great question. But I also just figured out I'm not going to answer it anymore. I'm just going to tell them to go listen to this part of this podcast.
Well, no, just say, hey, add more reps. Change the external cue, add more reps. Again, they're going to develop skills by doing it over and over and over again. And if they're dealing with younger kids, don't worry if they screw it up. And I know that's an ego thing for a lot of people, is they want it to do right. Well, it's a drill. Understand, it's a drill. Drills, yes. They're supposed to make mistakes in drills. That's how, as what Jimmy said, they're going to learn by making mistakes. And that's where you have to reframe it for those coaches, is they are learning, these kids are learning by making mistakes. And the more mistakes they make, the better at that age. They should be making tons of mistakes at that age. The more mistakes, the more mistakes they make at a young age, the better off they're going to be.
And
You know
need
what-
to
you know,
reframe
Jeff-
that for the parents.
Yes.
That's the thing for me.
Right. I was just actually you just went into what I was going to say. Okay. So when like when I used to give hitting lessons, okay, and I was done, and I would literally take the parent and say, okay, these are the drills that we did, or this is the drill that we did. This is what I was looking for. This is how it's done. Get those extra reps in at home. You know, mom and dad could roll them a ground ball. You know, that's so important. And at the same time, you're actually teaching the parent a little bit more about the game.
Jimmy, you just took the words out of my mouth. When I do lessons now, I want the parents there, because whether it's a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old, the parents are going to listen and learn better and be able to, they're going to be at the games. They're going to be the ones that reinforce what they're doing. So I think as a whole, we need to teach the parents. They're the ones that with their kids all the time, you know, take the time as a league, as you know, as a coach of a team, to teach the parents so that they can work with their kids. You know, we talk about old school, new school. Old school dads played catch with their kids all the time. It doesn't happen anymore. So teach the moms and dads how to play catch, how to do something in the house, in the backyard, wherever it is, but teach the parents so that that education continues at home, and it's not just the hour or two that we spend with the kids on the field. And that was going to be my parting view anyway. So
That's
appreciate
always my
this,
advice
Ryan.
to parents as they're leaving camp is go to Walmart right now, buy a wiffle ball and a wiffle ball bat, and go play with your kid in the backyard.
Ryan, I got to get running. I'd like to leave my parting shot here. My parting shot is what I told my son this morning, who's a freshman year in college. Don't forget why you started playing, and you started playing because you enjoyed it. And I think every coach and parent and player has to always remember that. We want to teach life lessons. We want to teach skills. We want to do all these. We want to win. But don't forget the joy of playing. We play the game. So that's what I wanted to leave with. Thank you, Ryan. This has been awesome.
All right, everybody. Appreciate you. Unless anybody's got anything else.
Yeah, Ryan, I got one thing real quick. Washington baseball and Washington high school baseball lost an absolute titan this week. Wyatt Tonkin, who's a longtime head coach at Shorewood High School, 300 plus wins, coaching for, I mean, I want to say 25 plus years. I might be underserving it by some way. Just passed away. My son is on that team, just got promoted to varsity as a freshman. And like Wyatt was a part of that decision, which the new acting head coach told him. And having never played for that guy, my son feels like a tremendous amount of pride that like Tonkin gave him the stamp. And I wanted to mention that because, you know, obviously when we're talking about youth baseball, you're talking about a disproportionate number of parent coaches. And those parent coaches, I understand how wrapped up you get in the identity of your team, whether it's rec ball or select ball, and the winning and losing that you might be experiencing, how like that defines your experience and your value as a coach. The problem is that it's like, you know, yeah, Wyatt won a bunch of games, but he lost a bunch of games too. And the reason that guy's service this weekend is going to be like a presidential service is because of how he made people feel. And that's not just the best kids on the team. It's not the Trevor Matsuis. It's not the Blake Snells. It's not the kids that he sent. You know, probably I think more than 100 kids went to go play college baseball through that guy. It's not just those kids. It's young men who come up and have an opportunity to be mentored by a guy like that who has just seen more baseball than somebody like me is ever going to, you know. So I think when you think about parent coaches, man, I've been so it's made my heart really full that like when I'm taking my son to his high school games now, that I'm seeing other kids that I either coached or coached against coming up in Little League. And they'll come up to me like, hey, coach, you know, and it's been, you know, for these kids, I mean, some of it's been 8 years, some of it's been 4. They're not asking me about the wins and losses that we experienced. I'm not asking them about that stuff. But I am talking to them about like the young person that they are becoming. And hopefully I was a positive conduit for that type of stuff more than I was the other. And I know that the beginning of my coaching experience, I was not, and I was a jerk, and I was coaching like the way that I was coached, and it wasn't good enough. So I think if I could say anything about like parent coaches that are apparently ideally listening to this, it's just like, understand that the time will come, if you are fortunate enough, that you will see these kids and they will no longer be playing with you. They'll no longer be playing for you. And I think it's a heck of a lot important that you develop the relationship with that person than it is the relationship that with that athlete, because they're only going to be an athlete for a very short amount of time.
All right, gentlemen. Jeff, Sean, enjoy opening day. Appreciate
Thank you.
ya.
Hey, Ryan, I just want to say one thing. For every coach that's listening, I just want to tip my cap to you for being a coach, for listening to this, going through the process of growing. It's this community, and I applaud anybody who puts a ball cap on and stands in a dugout with any group of kids at any age. So congrats to everybody, and thank you for your time.
Jimmy F., when does your podcast air?
It's random, Ryan. I'm trying to get more consistent, but it's so hard between, coaching the baseball, working a full-time job. I try to get one out every 2 weeks.
I do this because it's part of my main job. If I was still coaching, there's no chance. I have a lot of respect for the people that coach and try to do this, because it's very, very hard to do. I couldn't imagine coaching and doing this.
I'm still releasing episodes. I still have 2 more from the convention.
Paul, you're the best. Also, I appreciate you, sir. Thanks for jumping on as well. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Thank you.